do you feel positive about the future of supply chain?
Yeah.
Do you have a controversial episode you wish you could forget about?
No.
SaaS companies should only talk about solution features and stats in their marketing.
The answer is not yes, not no.
Oh, I think we have our first middle thumb.
There you go, middle thumb. Okay, I didn't know how to do that. I'm an optimist at heart.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Supply Chain Tech Podcast with Roamby. Scott Mears here, Marketing Manager at Roamby and host of the Supply Chain Tech Podcast. We thank you for joining us today. In this episode, we speak with Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. Sarah is the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain and Blended podcasts. We first dive into Sarah's supply chain journey. We then learn actionable branding hacks for SaaS companies looking to break through the noise. We also identify how personal branding can skyrocket your startup. Whether you're a startup or a multinational enterprise, this episode is your go-to guide for bringing your brand up to speed with the times.
Welcome, Sarah, onto the episode.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's such a joy to, to be able to interview you today because, I've listened to your podcast for so long, being the premier, supply chain podcast. We really look up to your podcast. So I feel very honored to be, interviewing you. I feel, yes, very honored today.
Well, you were like, it's been so long. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of been a long time.
You've got a lot of episodes and I must, over 400 episodes. It's amazing.
We just celebrated 400 episodes. I mean, how crazy. And that's the podcast only. That's not the second podcast. That's not the live shows. Crazy.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of content. That's a lot of content you got there. And because you carry out so many interviews, over 400 and all the other channels you mentioned there. I must ask, we like to do a bit of an icebreaker question is which guest really stands out in your mind and why?
So I get this question a lot.
Okay.
And I don't really answer it, I'll be honest.
Okay.
Because I feel like each one of them brings some sort of magic and I wouldn't want to pit one against another. That's not who I am. It's not who I put myself out to be. So I think what I'll do is say that the Blended podcast, which is my second podcast about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, I love doing all of the different interviews because they're all very different, but Blended really brings the magic because I bring 5 people from different walks of life together that sometimes don't know me and don't know each other. And we talk for an hour and a half about very, very difficult topics. And I might be a little bit biased, but when I say magic happens on those episodes, magic happens on those episodes. So I would say that if you had to ask me that question, Blended, is a really big passion of mine.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that. A very respectable question. I totally understand, not wanting to answer that. And yeah, it makes sense, going into that deep of a conversation with 5, people that don't know each other. That must be a really interesting bonding experience over the hour and a half.
Oh, it totally is. Like when I stop the record button, I've heard people say, thank you so much. I felt heard today. I've had people who might never have interacted thank each other, even though they were on opposing sides throughout the conversation. Thank each other for showing up that day.
That's
it's just, I just can't, talk about it enough.
That's amazing. So people, our listeners should be hearing this, if you've not already gone to Let's Talk Supply Chain or the Blended podcast, definitely get over there because there's some real deep, great conversations going on.
Yeah, and we're actually moving the podcast from Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended podcast, from Let's Talk Supply Chain to blendedpledge.org.
Okay, interesting.
Just so everybody knows, because we're separating the two now.
Okay. I think that'll come out in some of the answers to the questions today as well, where we dive into personal branding and everything. So I look forward to hearing more on your strategy behind this as well.
Yeah.
So before we do dive into that, I want to dive into, your story first. I really want to go right to the beginning, all the way back to where you weren't even in supply chain. And I must ask you is, yeah,
Has there ever been a time?
yeah. And I must ask, what inspired you to explore supply chain as a career path?
So I've been talking about supply chain or listening to conversations about supply chain at the dinner table since I was like 6, you know, 9. Sometimes I use 9 because I can't really remember 6. So I use 9.
Funny.
My dad owned a 3PL. And he owned that from 1989, and my mom joined him in the business as well. And so you can imagine at the dinner table, we were talking a lot of logistics,
Hmm.
ocean freight, air freight, trucking, building a business, right? As entrepreneurs in the 90s. And so that's why I say I don't really remember a time not talking about logistics and supply chain in my life.
Wow, so you really did start young on the journey there.
I
You're
did.
6 years old. Wow.
Mhm.
And at 6 or even 8 years old, you found these sort of conversations interesting?
I mean, I don't know if I would go there, and
Yeah.
I don't know if I completely understood the totality of the conversation. Um, but by the age of 16, I knew that I wanted to take over my dad's business in
Right, by
logistics.
16. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Didn't
So it really
happen,
does.
but
You carved your own path, and an
yeah.
amazing one at that. And that's really interesting because it does seem like, some people say they're born, for things in life. Did you feel like you maybe go as far as saying that you're born for maybe supply chain?
Well, on the website, it says you were born for supply chain, and that could be because I feel like I might be.
There we go. That's insight into the branding there. That's really interesting. And sort of shifting gears to, maybe a bit more of a serious question. And I think this blended, the conversations you have on the blended podcast is, be good for this answer as well. Is, you know, it's very the ratio of male to female within the supply chain industry is very heavily weighted to male. When
Mhm.
I go to, I attend a lot of events, and the agendas, they've definitely tried, they do put, a lot more women driven panels, but it's still very, male driven on the speaking panels, and
Mhm.
just generally in the events. So I do want to ask you is how have you navigated this, and did it deter or motivate you to join the industry of supply chain?
I honestly never really thought about it until I got into sales because I feel like in the office there was a really good mix of men and women at my family's 3PL. So it was never really anything that I thought about it until I got into sales and I started going to conferences. And I started going to a variety of different conferences and a variety of different industries. And I think I was one of 3 females at a conference, and that was probably the first time I was like, "Ooh, like we need more women in here. We need more women at these events. We need more women talking about it." And when I started the Woman in Supply Chain series in January 2018, it wasn't necessarily because I wanted, sort of this female empowerment movement in supply chain. It was really from a desire to want to learn more about the women who were in the industry and understand their journey to where they were going. Because I was like, if I'm wondering what that could look like, then I'm sure there's other women who are wondering what their path could potentially look like and what the opportunities could be and what they could ask for or not ask for, so that we could highlight the women who were in the industry and then hopefully encourage others to join us.
Interesting. So you're more coming at it as I want to support the women that are currently here, and I want to
Mhm.
drive, what they're looking for, and that, in turn will attract maybe
Yes.
more females to the to the industry. So that's
Yeah,
great.
and
And,
well, and
yeah.
also have their voices heard, right? Because like you were
Mhm.
saying on industry stages, we didn't necessarily hear from women in the industry for quite a while. And so I found that the podcast and the blog was a way to elevate those voices in a different way so that we could start seeing them and spotlighting them.
That's fantastic. And that there really is. And whenever I speak to people, because we got into this podcast game ourselves about 3+ years ago. And whenever I speak to people about, what's the podcast, it's always, let's talk supply chain. And
Yes, that is
it,
awesome to hear.
it,
We're doing a good job.
yeah, it's the one that always comes up. So you're definitely, an amazing spotlight for women and, the amazing talent within supply chain. So yeah, you're definitely doing
Awesome.
a wonderful job there.
Thank you.
Um, and with Let's Talk Supply Chain, what was your goal initially? I guess you may have answered it there actually, was it's spotlighting people, right? I was just wondering, has that evolved over time or has it always been
Oh,
that
yeah.
goal?
So I started this podcast back in 2016, and I was director of sales
Right.
and marketing at the family 3PL.
Mm.
And I needed to be able to tell our brand story, and I wanted to do it in a different way because marketing in supply chain back in 2016, I mean, it was okay. And so I was listening to a lot of podcasts at the time, and I was like, well, if Lewis Howes can have a podcast, why can't Sarah Barnes-Humphrey? And I asked a guy from my customs department to join me, and tongue in cheek, my marketing team was like, let's call it Two Babes Talk Supply Chain. Just to see how far we could push the industry. And so that's what we did. And I didn't really know what it was going to be about. I just knew all these interesting people in the industry. And so I started reaching out to them and I was like, hey, want to be our guest on the podcast? I think you can still see our first YouTube video on YouTube, and it's awful. Like it's absolutely awful, but it shows how far I've come.
Yeah.
And so that's why we started. I mean, we got 1,000 downloads overnight one night, and I knew I was kind of onto something. And then when my dad closed his doors in 2017, I was out on my butt with no co-host, no team, so I had to learn everything. And that's when I was like, well, let's really start focusing in on the organizations in supply chain and what they're doing, the tech companies, the services companies, the 3PL companies. Because I was talking to a lot of supply chain professionals. They're like, we have all these challenges, but I really don't know how to find anybody. I don't know who's good to solve this challenge. And so really that's when I started focusing on the organizations within supply chain and the solutions that they provide to the market. And that was about January 2018 when I started the Woman in Supply Chain series as well, and really started focusing on it as a potential business, because for the last 18 months prior to that, it was really to promote, the family's 3PL business.
Mm.
So, I mean, did it evolve? Yes, but
Mm.
originally it started to promote a brand,
Yeah.
and I just evolved it from there.
Yeah, it was more of a, transition to a new position and that
Mhm.
evolved the podcast in itself. And that you started early then, 2016. That's amazing. You got in that early with the podcast game.
Yeah.
That's really great to see.
I bought
And
I bought a podcast kit off of Amazon.
oh yeah. Yeah. Oh right. And do you still own this podcast kit or is it?
I have it
No.
somewhere. I don't think it
Uh,
works anymore. Like I used that thing until the day it could not be used anymore.
Yes, I know, you find yourself going through YouTube and trying to find the best mics, the best
Oh,
lighting and everything.
crazy.
And it's just, there are so many mics out there.
Mhm.
The amount of videos I have bookmarked, it's just so confusing. So I can imagine that journey of figuring all that out. It was quite a challenge.
Mhm. Yeah, and then you get into webcams, and I've been down so many rabbit holes. Yep.
Oh, well, we'll bring it back to supply chain branding, and I want to now dive into your personal branding. So we've learned a lot more about your story, and I now want to dive a bit more into your brand itself. So you know, a big challenge I see with a lot of SaaS companies, and I know you will too, is that struggle to build a brand in today's age
Mm.
that really connects with their customers. They're really trying and they're doing a lot out there, but they're not always really connecting with their customers. So what I want to do now is to understand how you've crafted your brand so then we can start understanding learnings for SaaS companies out there. So I want to first understand is how does your personal brand support you?
It's really kind of evolved organically. Like I didn't set out and I was like, I am going to build a personal brand. Um, yeah, I really didn't. I think it's just sort of evolved in how I show up on the podcast or for other people or empower other voices. And I think the two things that I would say are really important is consistency and being yourself and being able to share the parts of yourself that you want to share. Not everybody wants to share everything. I don't share everything. It might look like I share everything, but I don't. I have certain boundaries. And also, I think picking the social media platforms that work for you instead of I have to be everywhere and I
Mm,
have to be all the things. I think the stories really need to come out, like the founder story. What does that mean? Why did you pick the company name? These are the things that folks want to know. These are the background stories that people want to know about. Who are the people that are working for you? Why does it matter? Why does it matter to the audience that you're talking to as to why they should listen to you? Right.
mm.
And so I think you really need to craft that journey, craft that story, and let the audience in to what you're trying to build, the impact that you're trying to make. But keeping it authentically you and picking a schedule that you can keep consistent over 18 months.
Interesting.
Because if you decide, let's say you decide to do your own podcast and you're like, I'm going to do it every day. You need to make sure you can do it every day for the next 18 months. And if you can't, you need to dial it back
Yeah.
because people are going to get used to you showing up. And if you stop showing up, they're going to stop showing up for you.
That, yeah, that would be the number one. I always say, with, any market consistency, you're so right there, that consistency. And I think people get so excited initially when they think, this is going to be
Yeah.
it. Maybe it's podcast, it's a webinar series, maybe we're going to post a bit more often. And it's just everyone goes all in initially, all in, let's do it. And then after 5 weeks, they're like, I don't know what to post about anymore. I don't know what to talk. I don't have the time. And it's just, yeah, it all crashes down. So, no, that is a fantastic piece of advice that we should all be listening to. And what do you feel is the problem you're solving for your followers and customers? And why do you feel they really resonate with you?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I love that they do. But I'm not entirely sure. I think maybe the consistency. I think
Mm,
that I do show up for a lot of people in a variety of different ways. We feature women on our Women in Supply Chain series. We feature guests on the Blended podcast. We make an impact in a variety of different ways. I now have the Blended Pledge. So we're now giving away grants so that diverse voices can say yes to speaking engagements. So I pour as much as I can into the community as they pour into me. So going back to what I said, it's very much, that give and take with your audience. If I was taking all the time and asking them to buy all my things, I probably wouldn't have a brand right now. And so you have to create trust, you have to create value, I think, and you have to show that you have integrity. So for me, one of the ways to do that is if somebody is going to take time out of their day to comment on a post, I am going to make sure that we are going to reply. Either I'm going to reply or whoever's doing Let's Talk Supply Chain is going to reply, but we are going to reply to that person because they've taken the time out of their day to show some love to us. We want to show some love back. When people message me on LinkedIn, I don't have any unread messages. I get back to everybody for the most part. If you're trying to sell me something, I kind of
yeah.
let those ones go.
Yeah.
But I try to answer as many people as I possibly can. If they need some answers to some questions for like a school project or something like that, and they want to have a call and I can't have a call, I'm like, send me the questions and I'll get back to you. What is the due date? that kind of thing. And so you're going to get as much from your audience back as you pour into them, and you pour into the content, and you let them in as to who you are and what you stand for and what your journey has looked like, because every lesson that you've had on your journey is going to help and impact somebody. It might just be one person. It might not be a ton of people, but it'll be one person. And that's kind of how I think about it. I hope I answered your question.
You did, and I must say very well. The sort of the cliff notes I would say is, authenticity, transparency, and consistency. And I think, everything from what you're saying is you're doing every one of those, and it seems like those blended together is, pardon the pun, but those two, three together is that they're what are bringing the success. And it seems also that your authenticity comes from a place of care, and you're giving just as much as you're receiving. And I think that, from all the extra things, even just replying to messages, that can seem so small, and someone could maybe just, not keep that in their mind if they're hearing it right now on the episode, but that is much more impactful than you realize. Replying to those social messages that maybe you don't think may mean much, but it's quite a big feeling, when someone, that you've been, of course, if someone's been listening to you, watching you, to get the reply back all of a sudden, it's like, oh, wow, they've replied to me. It's a really nice feeling. It's kind of like, you become a celebrity to them. So yeah, please do, listeners, do listen up to these. They may seem like things maybe you've heard of them before, but remember that these are key things, and these, even though they can be little at times, it can have a big impact.
Yeah. And you can't just do it once, right? Like I said, you have
No,
to be consistent
consistency.
and make sure you can do
Yeah,
these things for
number
18
one.
months, not just 6 months.
Yeah.
It's got to be part of your brand equity, I think.
Consistent, yeah, absolutely. And that consistency is so key, and really where, I've fallen over in my marketing journey, definitely, many a times where, you've been understanding how to market and, building out different campaigns. And yeah, I've fallen to that. So I can definitely, resonate with that myself as well. I'm sure our listeners can as well.
Mhm.
I want to now move on to more focus onto the SaaS company branding.
Sure.
Now we understand your personal branding, and we've already got some really good insights into, how SaaS companies can really improve their brand. But now I want to get a bit more specific. So really, I'm going to start off right from the start. So what I want to do is give you a little bit of a situation, and then you can sort of give me some insight on what you would recommend to this SaaS company.
Okay.
So
I'm going to try.
yeah, don't worry, it's all going to be fun. So I'm a SaaS startup with a solution for the supply chain industry with no defined brand. Where do I start?
What do they mean by no defined brand? Like, do they have a company name and a
They have
logo?
a company name, they have a solution, but they're within their first year. So how do I build my brand? Where do I even start? Because a lot of SaaS companies, I see a lot of these events, there's a lot of startup incubators, there's always a stage for these really innovative technologies that are going to rock the industry, but maybe they just don't have the message out there, or they're just not being
Mm.
seen. So like, what are maybe it's just those baby steps, it doesn't have to be these big steps. So you've got to go and, do big things, maybe it's just some baby initial steps just to really define the brand. Maybe there's some notes there you can give us on this.
Yeah, I think they need to define their brand values. What is it that you're going to stand up for and stand and be in the social world as the brand? What does that mean? Is that integrity? Do you want to build trust? Do you want to be maybe the go-to solution in that particular niche? I don't know what that niche is, but I think you need to really define what those brand values are so that you can then communicate to whoever's going to do your marketing, that is what they need to adhere to with every decision that they're going to make. I think that is really important because that lays the foundation. I think you got to make sure that you have a brand that resonates, whether it's the symbol in the logo, the name, I was just recently listening to the CMO of MasterCard, and they're looking at symbols and sounds for branding. And so, I would sort of try to figure out what that is for you. What do you want to be known for? What's the longevity of your brand? You don't necessarily want to be rebranding. So you want to make sure that it resonates with people, and you might want to ask some people about it before you go all into the market. And then I would say that the founder really needs to get busy. I know they're busy already with all sorts of other things that they need to do to build the business and get new business and all that kind of stuff. But I think they need to get busy on LinkedIn. It starts with the founding team getting out there and making connections in a variety of different ways on LinkedIn, and being seen on LinkedIn through reacting to posts, through commenting, through sharing a post with some thoughts. Because at the end of the day, the brand that you're building is only as good as the people that you have. And most of the people who are going to be sticking around is that founding team. And so who are they? How are they getting out there? How are they being seen? Getting on industry stages to be able to, just get your brand seen. That's what I did. I got onto industry stages to moderate panels, and my brand was seen everywhere because my brand was on the screen for the panel. And sometimes you might have to do a few things for free or whatever. Maybe it's smaller events. Making sure that people are seeing you at these events. So taking behind the scene pictures, posting those on LinkedIn or the other social media platforms that you're going to be on. And so it really just takes a little bit every single day. So a little bit of time on LinkedIn, a little bit of time taking pictures of what you're working on, sharing it with, the community, and realizing that it's going to take time. Like, you're going to have to build those bricks every single day. And it's not going to happen necessarily overnight, but the more bricks you lay, the more times people see your brand, the faster it'll build, I guess.
I feel there was a lot of really good nuggets there. And, I just want to pull out a few for the listeners just in case they missed them is, even just the first one, the really basic one is just doing customer research before you do your brand. I feel like too many SaaS companies just jump into, let's just all talk on the table here. We're running the startup. We can figure out what the logo should look like. We can figure out what the slogan, but they don't actually speak to who they're going to be
Right.
speaking to. And I
Nope.
think that so often can be missed, and and sometimes it doesn't even become a thought. So I think that again is so crucial in and also not to be scared to do that again, further down the line with other projects, I think is so crucial. And I really like what you said there and giving you as real life examples of you going to moderate events. That's great, is getting busy and being comfortable to network. So, I mean, for those, if you're an entrepreneur, you've got to be out there, haven't you? And I'm sure you're gonna, maybe if you are a bit introverted, I guess you're gonna have to get a bit more comfortable with getting your voice out there. From what you're saying is getting your face out there and be comfortable. You were saying is be comfortable with being transparent with your journey. I think that's another thing you were saying with people can be a bit scared to do that. They can be like, well, I can't show them that it isn't working at the moment. That'd be a bit
Right.
embarrassing. But are you saying that they should show them this? We've got a device. It's a draft device. It's gonna do what we say, but at the moment, this is falling off and this is where we're at, but this is where, this is what we're currently doing. Are you saying go that far, transparency?
I think you can have boundaries with social media. I mean,
Mm,
there are certain things that I share and there's certain things that I don't share. So you got to figure out what that boundary is for you. But I mean, at the end of the day, for entrepreneurship and for companies, it's not all roses. You also have to be aware that everybody who you are talking to, from investors to whatever, are also watching you. And
yeah.
so you could probably tell the story in a way that, maybe doesn't divulge all the
Yeah.
nasty secrets. But I think, but it's not just the journey of the company either. It's like, what did you do before this to get here?
Mm.
Like, how many businesses did you start? Did you start 9, fail, learn from them, and then this one was the one that sort of everything is falling into place and is happening for you, that you were like, I'm all in on this one because the universe is kind of telling me this is where I need to be. Because that's what happened to me. I mean, I had so many side hustles. I tried so many things, and Let's Talk Supply Chain ended up being the one that the universe was like, okay, this is the one that we need to move forward with. What did you do before? What did that look like?
Mm.
What does your career journey look like? What school did you go to? Did you go to school for supply chain? You might not have, and that's okay.
I think this is really great. This is really great for our listeners to hear, to be comfortable, to be open, and, but at the same time, only do what is comfortable at the same time. You don't have to go too far, but at the same time, it's okay to share these sort of insights, and people want to know you as a person and want to know what drives
Yeah.
you. And want to know, hey, I've been if the person on the other side go, I'm still failing. I've tried 100 times. And you're just saying, it worked for me first time, it's going to be hard to resonate. But
Yeah.
if you say, yeah, I failed a bunch too. So I get, that's starting to make a lot more sense when you really think about this.
Well, and
Um,
one thing that you said earlier about being comfortable, I just want to go back to that, because you're never going to be comfortable. Do not ever get comfortable. So when you're thinking about getting out of your comfort zone and reacting to a post, commenting on a post, sharing your thoughts on a post, that may never come to you naturally, but it's just something that you need to do. So I just want to go back on that, because if you don't feel comfortable, it's okay. Just
mm.
make sure you're still moving forward.
That's a great, yeah, thank you for that one. That's a really great comment. I can definitely resonate. I'm sure you can as well when you went on the podcast for the first time and started talking into a mic, that you were a bit nervous on the first episode.
I
So
still get
yeah.
nervous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so there we go, guys. Sarah leading the leading supply chain podcast, and she still gets nervous. So don't be worried when you get nervous doing these things. Um, so now we've understood, for a startup, I want to now give support to those SaaS companies that maybe have been around for much longer. Maybe they've been around for 10 years plus. So they've got a more well-known, well-defined brand.
Mhm.
What do you feel as maybe some actionable steps that they can take to make their brand and marketing resonate more with their customers? Maybe it's something they can do. Maybe you're even going to say, hey, start a podcast. What's something that you feel they can start doing today to really get up to speed with today's technology and today's market?
I am going to give a plug to the influencer community in supply chain, because it has grown and there's a lot of amazing people who are doing incredible things in this industry. And I think you want to get plugged into the influencer community in supply chain. Um, and I think you want to work with them. You want to build out credibility. You want to do some co-branding campaigns. You want to be able to get different perspectives from other people in the industry of what's happening as well, and create conversation around what you're doing, and not just within your company internally. You want to be able to have external conversations with other people that are going to resonate. And so that's one of the things that I would say. I mean, I might be a little bit biased, but I would definitely do that. And then as far as, I guess, branding and different things like that, again, I go back to this conversation that I just heard with MasterCard, and they just rebranded and they took MasterCard out of their logo, and they're just going with symbols. They're going with symbols and they're going with sounds. So what is the newest marketing trend? What are some of the things that are working in other industries that you can bring to your brand in supply chain? If you are known in the industry, maybe take a look at your logo. Maybe you try a symbol. Maybe you try a song. Maybe you do want to start a podcast. And if you do, there's people like us that can help you do that.
That'd be wonderful. I always love finding a new supply chain podcast. So I hope if one comes out of this, that'd be wonderful to see. I really would. And I sort of want to shift to an interesting question that I feel, can be quite challenging for companies. Now, this maybe is a little less focus on SaaS companies as a whole, but I feel it is really a key question that we need to answer. Maybe we don't have the answer today, but we have some thoughts on it. And that's really, I mean, we all know that everyone's chasing their 2030, their 2050, carbon neutral goals. And, there are some industries out there that it's very challenging with today's technology to get 100% green or even close to 100% green. So for those industries, maybe like a chemical industry or a mining industry, how do you advise these companies in a world where consumers and companies are much more conscious of the sustainability and ethics of companies? How do you advise these companies to evolve their story to consider where they are with sustainability without greenwashing? Because again, consumers and companies, they're seeing through it. If you're just going to keep pushing the same message, no, we've got this certification, we do this, we plant all these trees. I'm not saying they're not good, but I feel people are just seeing through it so much now, and it's becoming, I've definitely experienced that is now a metric of whether we can do business anymore. Would you hit these quotas in sustainability?
So I think the action is good. I think we have to be careful in judging people for taking action. I think any and all action being taken is a good thing as long as it's moving us forward. But I also feel like it's up to the individuals. So what I do in January usually is, instead of asking people to do a New Year's resolution, which kind of focuses on lack in yourself, I ask them to pick a sustainable development goal for the year and do something either daily or weekly towards that, whatever that looks like, because every small action that we take as an individual is going to make an impact. So the reason why I bring that up, because you talk about organizations need to start internally. And so, yes, I do think tree planting is important, but it's only one aspect. And so what are you doing to potentially get the individuals within your organization thinking about what they can do on an individual level, and how are you supporting them to do that? Are you giving them some time off so that they can go and spend time on that sustainable development goal? And if they don't know what to do, are you giving them resources so that they can figure out what it is that resonates with them, so that they can go and support that sustainable development goal? Maybe that's for a couple of hours, half a day, whatever that looks like. So I think there is responsibility from an organization as a whole. And I don't think tree planting is greenwashing. I think tree planting is action being taken. I don't think it should be the only action being taken. And I think that it can be part of a strategy. And so I think we have to be a little bit careful of how much we are asking for as, consumers, et cetera, of an organization, and being like, oh, well, you're doing that. That's not good enough, which is fine. But we need to acknowledge that people are taking action and doing something, and then saying that needs to be part of the strategy. What are you going to do next? What action are you going to take next? Because that's just sort of how we have to be a little bit careful of poo-pooing on people that are taking some action, maybe not as much as we want them to, but pushing them to take more and acknowledging what they are doing.
That is, it's so important what you've said there, because I think it is so easy, to jump to, that isn't enough. That isn't enough, but, you're so right. The action is happening. And, again, to me, to whoever, it may not be enough, but they're taking action and they're moving towards, a greener future. And that's what's most important. And what's interesting, like an interesting example is, consumers who maybe want, next day delivery, but at the same time, they don't want that impact on the environment. So, it's
So that's why I ask, right?
oh,
What are you doing as an individual?
yeah.
And through your buying habits, that does make a huge difference. But if you're asking a company to do one thing and then do more, what is it that you're doing? So you're changing your buying habits to help with that. But what are you doing towards an actual sustainable development goal on a regular basis to move things forward? Because if we all did something,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
would be moving way faster.
That's yeah. If anyone's gonna take anything from today, I feel like that's the nugget, just taking action. And I feel, with podcasts exploding at the moment, a lot of people, can just be talking on podcasts and can say a lot and can comment a lot on things. But are they, taking action in their life and taking action on those things maybe they don't believe in, or so I think this is a really key thing, and you're totally right. Imagine if everyone, tomorrow started taking action on some sustainability goals, what an impact that would make. What an impact. And I'm gonna jump to a question because I know it's come up a couple times now, and I really I find it interesting it's coming up because what I've noticed in startups and even medium-sized companies, a lot of the brand can be the individuals within the company, on the board members, the VPs, the directors. A lot of the time, they can be a big percentage of the brand because they have a lot of notoriety, maybe from past endeavors. So how integral would you say is the individual personal brands of the people within a company versus the brand of the company itself?
Huge. I was having a conversation with a CEO the other day, and he was like, I get all these speaking opportunities, and my last post got like 400 to 500 reactions, and I'm good. I'm like, okay, but your company just got bought out and you have a contract left, let's say 18 months. What are you going to do after that? Well, I'm going to do consulting. Okay. Well, all of that's going to go away. If you don't take advantage of it right now, all of that's going to go away because you're now on the sales side. You're no longer a CEO of a big brand, an established brand. So everybody's personal brand is important to establish. Whatever that looks like to you, you don't have to say yes to speaking engagements, but whatever that personal brand looks like to you, because you don't know what's going to come around the corner. So what you're saying no to right now might disappear later on if you don't take advantage of it and don't establish those relationships. And so I would say everybody's personal brand matters, but it's like I said, you have to define what that success looks like to you.
Understood. And I feel that's another integral one is that, building the personal brands and of course, people growing their careers in the company. So it's got a huge residual value as well for future proofing everyone as well. So that's a really
Yeah,
interesting
don't
one.
think about today. This is what I keep
Yeah.
saying, right? Think about 18 months from now.
Yeah.
What do you want that to look like? What is it? How much work do you want to put in? What's the effort that you want to put in? Maybe it's not work. Maybe you love it. Maybe you start it and you absolutely love connecting with people, cheering people on in comments, sharing your perspective on an article, and somebody comes back and says, "Oh my goodness, I have never thought about it that way. Thank you."
And with that, an interesting sort of an add-on question to what you were saying there. If you are, a CEO that maybe doesn't operate always within the same industry, maybe they move
Right.
between industries, what, how should they be communicating their personal brand? Should it always be industry focused, or should they now approach it differently and actually approach it more from, as a CEO and running businesses versus industry focused? Like, how would
Totally
you?
up to them. What's their passion? What's their passion?
Mm,
Like, what are you passionate about talking about? How do you want to help people? What's the stuff inside that you can share that's going to help other people? And maybe that's in the industry right now, but you also want to maintain contacts that are in other industries because, again, you never know what's around the corner. You could be the CEO of a supply chain company or a VP of a chain company today, and then potentially the VP of a retailer tomorrow.
mm.
So, what do you want that to look like for you? What do you want to talk about? What's important to you? What is something that you can talk about for the long term that's going to keep you excited and motivated to talk about?
Interesting. So I guess what you're saying, I could go, I don't know if you mean it as far as, going down, are you meaning keeping it work related, what we're talking about? Or you're saying, hey, I love football, so I'm going to talk about football.
I mean, if you want to
level.
do a post today about
Yeah,
football and
yeah.
then you want to do a post tomorrow about supply chain, do it.
What a great
You're
answer.
going to find your people in different ways.
Hmm.
And there's
That's
nothing
it.
wrong with that. Resonating with somebody about football does not take away from a professional relationship. It's all a human experience, whether we're, in professional mode or personal mode, it's a human experience. And relationships matter, right? Representation matters in a variety of different ways. So for me, I'm in supply chain, but I've also been a big advocate of diversity in supply chain. And now diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So it's evolved for me, right? The different impacts, the different conversations that I'm having. And I just sort of go with it wherever I want it to go.
I mean, that sounds like the dream job, to be able to go wherever you want to go. That I feel like that's what everyone aspires to, but
Okay,
feels like,
but on social
yeah.
media, you can do that. There's no rules.
No, I guess not.
Like, why are we imposing rules on ourselves? If you post about football and it bombs and nobody resonates with you about it, nobody cares. Nobody's going
Mm.
to remember it tomorrow, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people do put those rules on a lot, how they can communicate. But what's coming out of this podcast is that again, don't be scared to be authentic.
Hmm.
Don't be
And
scared
try
to be you.
things. If
Yeah.
you put out a podcast episode about a particular topic and it bombs, only you're going to know about it. Nobody is paying that much attention to you.
People need to be listening to this, and I'm so excited for the listeners to hear.
I hope that I'm not ruffling too many feathers with this one. You caught me on a
No,
good day.
no, no, I think it's something that really people need to hear. I think I feel like people do have that thought in the back of their mind, but it gets shut down immediately once they actually get down to, creating their personal brand story and their branding of the company. So all
Mhm.
of a sudden it goes into professional mode and it must be within these very stringent rules that no one's
Right.
told them about. They've just gone, oh no, we have to keep within this lane, you know. So
It's like we
yeah,
talked about before we jumped on. You were like, I'm going to send this to you. You can watch it. Let me
yeah.
know. I was like, no, it's done. It's out there. Just do it. You can't get so caught up in how everything needs to be like this. Nobody's going to resonate with it.
Hmm.
People have flaws. People want to resonate with, the other day I was doing my live show and we were talking about a story about okay, I can't even say the word chicken fillet, Chick-fil-A, whatever that is. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a really hard time with that brand and saying the name. I had everybody in fits of giggles because I could not say this name and I had to say it over and over and over again. It took me 5 times every single time. It is what it is.
Yeah, I know Chick-fil-A is quite a popular,
Ah,
quite
see, you can do
a
it.
yeah, I've enjoyed a few Chick-fil-A takeouts. I've enjoyed, yeah, it's so it seems like did you ruffle a few feathers there when you couldn't say it?
No, no, I think everybody was laughing at me, which is fine.
Oh, but you were willing to be like you're willing
Yeah.
to be authentic. You're willing to be vulnerable and just be you, and that's
Hmm.
why then people endear to you. And that's what I feel is really coming out of this episode is just I guess be comfortable to be uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
that is, being yourself, online. You don't doesn't have to be a different persona online.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really great takeaway for not just personal brand, but as a brand, as a company as well, to really show the transparency and honesty of the journey.
Hmm.
Um, so I want to, before we do a little thumbs up, thumbs down segment, which I always love to do with our guests, I just want to ask one final question. Is I just see this a lot, this confusion a lot of SaaS companies is that they don't know the balance between, what should I share? Should I only share facts and figures and stats, or features, or should I be sharing more the people behind building it and the people that it's impacting? You know, where do you lean on that? Because I feel like the SaaS companies either go all into one or all into the other. They don't blend it well. And I feel they can get a bit lost in this, and no
So I
one
think
to
I think you can do both, but I think you need to tell the story of it. So if you're going to talk about a feature, talk about the story behind the feature. Why did you decide to design this feature? Why is it important? Why should anybody care? Did you write it all out on a napkin? Do you have a picture of that napkin? Was it a client that called you and was like, I love your system, but I hate when it does this? And so you created a feature to fix that. So I think it is less about focusing on the particular, we need to share this and we need to share that, and more about the stories that you are telling behind what you are sharing. I'll leave you with that.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Wise words. I'm note-taking here as well. These are some really great learnings for everyone. And I want to finish off with a fun thumbs up, thumbs down segment. It's a fun segment we do. It's just yes or no answers. So all you need to do is give me a big thumbs up or a thumbs down. And if you could also say yes or no, so for the audio listeners, they know what you said as well. Okay, great. So with 400 conversations recorded on Let's Talk Supply Chain, do you feel positive about the future of supply chain?
Yes.
Do you have a controversial episode you wish you could forget about?
No.
Marketing departments should never seek feedback from other departments on how to market the product/services because they know best.
Absolutely 100% no. I'm not very good at that. Like,
yeah, that came thumbs down.
it feels awkward. I'm an optimist at heart.
Yeah. Every SaaS company should have a podcast to help them connect with their customers.
Yes, and they should call me.
SaaS companies should only talk about solution features and stats in their marketing.
No, I mean, it depends how they talk about it. Like we just talked about.
Yeah, exactly. The answer's rewind a little bit.
Kind of. The answer is like, not yes, not no. Kind of like, anyway.
Oh, I think we have our first middle thumb.
There you go, middle thumb. Okay, I didn't know how to do that. Obviously, I'm not very good at this thumbs up, thumbs down thing.
And the final one, every SaaS company needs a mascot to improve their brand.
A mascot?
Like a football mascot, or like Terry the Tiger.
I mean, if they want it, sure. That one's a middle one too.
That's a middle one. Wow,
two middle ones.
Wow, we're breaking the rules today.
I'm a rule breaker.
Yeah, I can see. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. I really enjoyed this podcast. And again, thank you for coming on. It's wonderful to be able to get the opportunity to interview you. It's been a pleasure of mine.
Thank you so much for having me. Can I just let everybody know to go to letstalksupplychain.com?
Yes, please do.
And connect with me on LinkedIn, Sarah Barnes-Humphrey.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Sarah. And please do go over to your podcast and to your socials as well.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. We'll give everyone a little wave together.
Bye-bye. I do peace signs. See, I totally don't go by the rules.
Breaking the rules today. Peace signs. Bye-bye, everyone. Hi, my name is Scott Mears, and I'm one of the hosts of the Supply Chain Tech podcast with Roamby. On this podcast, we talk to supply chain heroes from around the world about everything, ranging from the disruptions related to supply chains, their personal experiences with tracking technologies, strategies to build resilience, and much, much more. We already have some recommended videos for you to the side of me, and if any of this sounds interesting to you, do subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss another Roamby video. I'll see you next time.